Louisiana has made big progress in public education over the last 10 years. And this is a fact that doesn't really go very often discussed, but the reality is you've seen an 11-point raise in graduation rate, that you've seen a 50% increase in the rate of kids reading, writing, and doing math on grade level over the last 12 years in Louisiana. And so I want to use that as the foundation to say two things that I think will be critical in understanding what the governor has proposed. First of all, that progress has been made fundamentally because of classroom teachers. And families have obviously played an enormous role, but in the school, it's our classroom teachers that have made that progress. And second, what the governor and the legislature are considering and have proposed is not a radical overhaul, as I think is tempting to describe it as, of public education. It's just looking at where in Louisiana are things working well for children, and how can we do those things across Louisiana. It's simply looking at best practices and saying, how can we do those things everywhere if they're working for kids? It's not a radical reinvention of the way that things are done. Let's just talk about then the current state of education in Louisiana. If you have 100 kids right now who enter 9th grade in our state, 71% will finish high school on time with a high school diploma. 49 out of those 71 will go on to some kind of post-secondary education, and 19 of them will ultimately end up leaving with an associate's or a bachelor's degree. Now, I cannot underscore more severity than that, because that really speaks to what Stephen was describing. 19 people holding a degree out of 100 means that we will continue to be near the top in the country, if that rate continues, in jobs that require a high school diploma only. And we will be near the bottom, if not at the bottom, in the country in terms of jobs that require some sort of advanced education. It's not to say that we need to be building our education system around four-year economics majors at LSU, but it is to say that in the 21st century, we're going to need a workforce that is prepared beyond simply a high school diploma. And the challenge is in front of us. And let me just give you a couple of data points. We are 50th in the country in terms of advanced placement test success. Even more devastating, we are 50th in the country in terms of the percentage of kids who grow up in Louisiana, or grow up in our state, having a parent who has an associate's or a bachelor's degree, just one parent. So it's a cycle as well, and it's our job to disrupt the cycle by ensuring that the things that we're doing in schools that are really working, that we're doing elsewhere. And you know, the thing about it is there's a lot of discussion about poverty and this is just getting into a little bit about what we've seen over the last couple of weeks about how schools have the burden of poverty, we have a high amount of poverty, there's struggles in a lot of our homes, the economy has been difficult, and that's all true. And if you're going to discount the effects of poverty in the classroom, then you just haven't been to a classroom. But it's also true that in no state in the country is there more truth being put to the lie that kids growing up in poverty can't learn. And again, what we're talking about is looking at a place like New Orleans. Just to talk about New Orleans, 23% of the kids 4 years ago in New Orleans were reading, writing, and doing math at grade level. Now 48% are. And that's our highest poverty, highest violent crime, lowest achieving historical district. It's not just in New Orleans. I was up at a school a couple weeks ago, Oak Park Elementary in Caddo Parish, where literally 97% of the kids receive a free or reduced lunch. That school is a B on our system. It's on its way to an A. Nearly 80% of the kids are reading, writing, and doing math on grade level. So there's all evidence that we can change things. And it's not a question of some radical overhaul or reinvention of public education. It's a question of doing what's going on at Oak Park Elementary across our state. And so what is it that the governor's proposed? He's really proposed four things. Number one, the Bessie Board has already adopted, and that is high standards for all children. We have adopted national Common Core standards in reading, writing, and math in our state. And while it's broadly not gone reported, what that does is, A, it deepens the work and makes it more rigorous that we're going to require from our students of these standards to be adopted in 2014. But it also means that accountability, because these are national standards, is no longer going to mean, what's the difference between this parish and that parish. It's going to be, how is Louisiana doing relative to Oklahoma, doing relative to New Hampshire? And that will be the report that runs in your newspapers. And so the question in the governor's package is, how do we respond to the challenge of national standards? How do we respond to the challenge of being economically successful and viable? How do we respond to the challenge of being 50th in the nation of AP completion, 50th in the nation of education attainment in the home? And he's proposed three things. One is early childhood education. It works. You want to know why results are rising in West Baton Rouge Parish? It's in great part because they've got every single child being educated in an academic pre-K program. Why are West Feliciana's outcomes with high poverty kids high? Because early childhood education works. And so the governor's plan is not a radical reinvention of early childhood education. The governor's plan is make every early childhood education program subject to academic standards that are measured when a child gets into kindergarten. Keep the programs that work, don't keep the programs that don't. Second, with respect to our workforce, when we bring our teachers into, after the pre-K system, when we bring them into our K-12 system, the reality is we have a system right now that is not designed to keep our best teachers in the classroom. We need to have a system that's designed to maximize the number of effective teachers that we have. And when you ask the principal at Oak Park Elementary, or when you ask the principal at Lafayette Elementary in New Orleans, these schools that are moving the ball forward with high poverty kids, what do? The first question is, it's all about the classroom teacher. So this isn't a major overhaul in terms of how we do things. It's simply an attempt to replicate how we do things in the settings in effect in Louisiana that are most effective. And it's very simple. We struggle to find highly qualified math and science teachers. So why don't we recruit them by paying them differently from how we pay other teachers? We don't give teachers feedback, as we should demand in any professional environment. So why don't we evaluate them and give them feedback on how they're doing? We grant them a satisfactory label 98.5% of the time, and we just give tenure to anyone who manages to hang in with us for 3 years, as if every single teacher is a cookie cutter. Well, in Oak Park Elementary or Lafayette Academy, that's not how it's done. People are given honest feedback so that they can continue to grow. They're compensated based on how effective they are. They're compensated based on experience too, but they're compensated based on how effective they are, because we've got to keep our effective teachers in the classroom. And finally, for that small minority who are low performing, and after you've tried and tried to make sure that they're improving, we don't give them lifetime job protection at Oak Park Elementary. We don't give them lifetime job protection at Lafayette Academy. Instead, we make the hard decision to not give them lifetime job protection in the form of tenure. These are really, really simple things that at Oak Park, at Lafayette, and at dozens of other schools across Louisiana are happening. Somehow this gets painted as a radical reinvention of public education, when in fact it's just a simple example of best practices that we should want in every classroom in this state. And the same is true when it comes to choice. Let's talk about what the governor's bill proposes for choice. It basically says this: a parent knows best, and that a parent who is a taxpayer and has not been getting everything that their child deserves from the public education system should have a choice of schools in other parishes, should have a choice of charter schools, should have a choice of private schools, should have a choice of online education, should have a choice of career education. The governor's plan essentially says we've got 700,000 different kids in this state. Why would we have one service provider for every child? And let's put the tax-paying parent in a position to choose. That's not a radical reinvention of anything. Because when I was up at Ruston High School 3 weeks ago, I saw kids learning online. When I was in Ascension Parish 2 days ago, you ask parents, why is this district growing? And they'll tell you, because we moved here, because we chose the school system here. This is all happening everywhere across Louisiana. And yet we want to paint it as some radical reinvention of public education. It is an example. School choice is an example of one best practice that we should insist exists in every community, because it's working in the places that are working for kids. Now let me just address finally, before I close, just one big, what I think, myth in all of this is. There are a lot of myths going around. Myths that this package somehow touches teacher retirement. It doesn't touch teacher retirement. There are myths that this touches teacher tenure. If you're a teacher today and you have tenure, you have to get a an ineffective rating in order to lose your tenure. There is a myth going around that somehow due process is eroded. Absolutely not. The governor's bill proposes a multi-stage series of due process steps. So there's a lot of mythology going around, but let me tell you what I think the most damaging and I think inaccurate myth of all is. The portrayal of teachers as if teachers don't want change, and the portrayal of teachers that they are cookie cutter, one size fits all, one person can speak for the entire lot. We have 50,000 teaching professionals in this state. They have diverse ambitions, they have diverse views. When teachers are leaving their schools, when they're disappointed in what's going on, it's because they're not being respected as professionals. And the view that all teachers are reflexively opposed to what has been presented is inaccurate and a misrepresentation of their professional ambitions and the diversity across those 50,000 people. Where it comes to low performers, teachers actually are the ones who know which teachers in their schools are low performing. They want a professional culture. When it comes to getting feedback, when teachers leave, it's because they're not getting feedback. Teachers want that kind of feedback. But we continue to want to portray these 50,000 diverse, ambitious professionals as if they are reflexively opposed to what's being proposed in the legislature, and it's wrong. When I speak to teachers, the one thing I hear is they want to be viewed as professionals. What the governor has proposes to treat every classroom teacher as a professional by applying best practices that are up and running in this state right now and serving kids well to every classroom across this state. This is not a radical overhaul. It's a continuation of the progress that's already been made, the progress because of teachers. We're trying to continue that progress by applying best practices that already exist in Louisiana to every single school in Louisiana, because that's what will work for our kids. Thanks so much.
The message is that the governor has proposed legislation that really uses the best practices of things that are going on across the state and are really working for kids, and he's proposed to expand them across the state.
What kind of an impact would this have on teachers?
I think the impact on teachers is really a culture of merit in their schools where great performance and going the extra mile is rewarded for once. And I'm tired of systems that just call every teacher just satisfactory, as if that does a decent respect to the 15-hour days that they're putting in every day for their kids.
How would you characterize the reform package, if passed, in contrast to the way the public schools are operating right now?
Well, I think it's a big step forward, but it's a big step forward in things that really are already going on in many schools, and we're just saying if it's good for those kids, let's make it good for all kids by expanding these great options.
You mentioned two examples, one in Caddo Parish and one in Orleans Parish.
Well, those are two schools, Lafayette Academy and Oak Park Elementary School, that are really moving things forward for their kids. And I think our point is, if things are working there, they can work anywhere. And so why don't we do those things across the state for our kids?
We're here today at the Press Club to talk about how critical education reform is to the future of the state of Louisiana. I've been Secretary of Economic Development for about 4 years, ever since Governor Jindal took office. We've made a tremendous amount of progress in that period of time. Our economy has outperformed the South in the country. We've moved up to our highest ever position on every major national ranking of state business climates. But the reality is we're not yet where we ultimately want to be. For our state to become one of the very top states in the country in terms of its business climate, in terms of its economic results, the single most important thing that we can do this year is for the legislature to adopt the governor's education reform plan, which will position Louisiana for a brighter economic future.
Where does Louisiana rank now in terms of being attractive to businesses? And if the governor's education plan were to pass, where would you move?
Well, in terms of our business climate rankings, as most people are aware, we used to rank in the bottom 10 in the country. In fact, when Governor Jindal took office, we typically ranked roughly in the 40s. We've moved up an average of 20 spots in 4 years, a bigger improvement than any other state in the country in that period of time. We're now at our highest position ever, but we're roughly in the 20s. This plan, if fully implemented as the governor has proposed, if fully adopted by the legislature, I believe will take Louisiana from the middle to the top 7 to 15 states in the country across the board in every major national ranking of state business climates.
How key is public education quality to your efforts to recruit businesses to locate in Louisiana?
The quality of public schools, the quality of available workforce, these things are the single most important factor that most companies consider when they're making a location decision. We've made Louisiana's business climate much more attractive through business tax cuts, through governmental ethics reform, through creating customized workforce development programs like Fast Start. But the reality is today, the biggest thing that's holding us back is our educational system, despite significant progress over the last 10 years, is still ranked very poorly compared to other states in the South and around the country.